Hi everyone. So today we're going to talk about the humerus. So we're going to go through all the major and minor landmarks of the humerus. So let's start with the major ones. So what we have is the head of the humerus, followed by two necks. Okay, we have the anatomical neck and we also have the surgical neck. Now the surgical neck is important because of its clinical relevance. There is the axillary nerve that basically surrounds the surgical neck, and there are also two vessels, the anterior circumflex humeral artery and the posterior circumflex humeral artery, and these basically are found surrounding the surgical neck. So the importance, the clinical relevance to this will be discussed later on. But for now, remember that those are the two arteries found in this area, and the nerve that's found there is the axillary nerve. Okay, so that's followed by the shaft of the humerus. So there are a couple of structures that we need to discuss over there, so we'll get to that later on. But just to finish the major parts of the humerus, we have then at the distal end the condyle of the humerus. Okay, so those are the major aspects, the major landmarks of the humerus. Now let's get into a little bit more detail. So what we have over here on the head is the greater tubercle. Okay, so that's also followed by the lesser tubercle. So what is the importance of the greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle? So these are basically points of attachment for muscles. So we have the rotator cuff muscles, which are found around this area. So those muscles insert into the greater tubercle and into the lesser tubercle. Okay. Moving forward, what we have in between the greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle is the intertubercular sulcus, okay, which is also known as the bicipital groove. So it's basically a groove that allows the passage of the long head of the biceps brachii. So the biceps brachii is one of the muscles that you find on the anterior compartment of the arm, and it has two heads. It has a short head and a long head. The long head passes here, in between the two tubercles, within the intertubercular sulcus. Okay. Now, moving forward, then into the shaft of the humerus, we get the deltoid tuberosity. Okay, so this is basically the place where the deltoid muscle inserts into. And what we find on the posterior aspect or posterolateral aspect is the radial groove right here. So why is this important? This, it's basically a place, again, of very clinical relevance, because you find the radial nerve as well as the deep brachial artery, which is a branch of the brachial artery. So these two pass within this area. So there are certain complications that take place, especially if you have a fracture of in the mid shaft of the humerus that can cause damage to the radial nerve, which can lead to severe consequences. So, but again, that's something that will be discussed in a later video. So for now, just remember that the radial nerve has, the radial groove has the radial nerve and it has the deep brachial artery. Okay, what you can also find within the shaft of the humerus, it's the nutrient foramen over here. Okay, this is not visible all the time, so if you have a real specimen, a real humerus, most of the times you will not be able to find this foramen, but you need to know that it's there, and it's basically used to supply nutrients to the bone. Okay, that's its entire function. So you get a small vessel coming from the brachial artery, which enters this foramen and supplies the nutrients to the bone. Okay, so that's all for the shaft of the humerus. So now getting again our anterior aspect of the bone, we can move on to the condyles, to the condyle of the humerus. So over here we get two ridges, okay, and if I can find them, okay, there you go. One is the lateral supraepicondylar ridge, which is found on the lateral aspect of the humerus, and the other one is the medial supraepicondylar ridge, okay. So these ridges are used for the muscle attachments, sort of muscle origins, for certain muscles that run basically from the lower end of the arm into the forearm. Okay, so that's their main use for both the lateral supraepicondylar ridge and medial supraepicondylar ridge. What we also have is the medial epicondyle, which is found again on the medial aspect, and we also have the lateral epicondyle, if I can find that. There we go, lateral epicondyle. Again, these are important for muscle attachment. You get all your extensors and flexor muscles that insert into these two epicondyles, so very important. But for the moment being, we don't have to describe which muscle precisely inserts into those condyles, but just remember that again, those two are two places for the attachment of muscles. Moving on, we have the capitulum, which is essentially the articular head for the humeral radial joint. So what is the humeral radial joint? It's the joint that's found between the humerus and the radius. So the two bones that make the forearm are the radius and the ulna. So the radius joins together with the humerus by using the capitulum. Okay, while if you take then this structure, which is called the trochlea, it's the articular head for the humeral ulnar joint. So it's the connection between the humerus and the ulnar bone. Okay. What we have over here then, we have two fossas. This is one, this is the other one. So this one is the radial fossa, and the way you guys can remember these two fossas is basically by looking which one is lateral. So by looking at these two, the radial fossa is found laterally, so therefore it has to be the radial fossa, okay, because the radial bone is attached again to the capitulum, which is also found on the lateral aspect. So you can use that to remember which one is which. And this one found on the medial aspect is the coronoid fossa. Okay, so these are the two fossas that you find on the anterior aspect of the humerus. But then if we move to the posterior aspect of the humerus, we find the olecranon fossa. Okay, so this is a fossa that contains the olecranon of the ulna when the forearm is extended. So whenever you cause the extension of your forearm, the olecranon of the ulna ends up inserting itself into this fossa. So this fossa is extremely important. So there are different ways through which you can identify whether this humerus is the left bone or is the right bone. The way that I normally do it is by looking at these fossas. Okay, I know that these two fossas have to be on the anterior aspect. I know that the olecranon fossa has to be on the posterior aspect. So I normally use those two ways to identify whether it's which part is anterior and which one is posterior. And then I look at the head of the humerus. The head of the humerus always needs to face medially. So in this case, it is facing medially in respective to the body. So looking at all those structures, looking which one is the anterior, which one is the posterior surface, looking at which way the head is facing, we can understand whether this humerus is right or left. So in this case, it's obviously the right bone. So having said that, we are basically coming to the conclusion of this first video. If you guys like the video, leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel. I will be releasing many other videos of the human body. I'll be going through all the other bones and muscles, organs, and so on. So having said that, I'll see you guys on the next one.